think we're ready to go. So very good morning, everyone who's here live, and good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube. So let's start, as we always do, this busy and complicated session with a really wonderful intention, turning our hearts in love and in care to everyone, very especially to those with whom we have karma. I think we might come back to that today in the talk in a very pretty, beautiful analogy. But anyway, our parents, our siblings, our children, friends, enemies, those who figured strongly in our karma, very, very important that we are here for them. And we use our very, very best intelligence, wake up our minds and our diligence and all of our good qualities, we bring them together to try and listen well, understand the Buddha's teaching, what's called the Buddha's intent, so we understand things as the Buddha would really have wanted us to understand them. And then we feel very, very, very happy because we have Dharma. Dharma, our best friend, for all of our lives to come. Thank you. Sonje chodon soji chonamla jancho badwa dane chapsanje. Dagi jinso jipe sunomje rola penchira sonje drup parashu. Semchen tamche dewa dang dewe judan den parajuche. Dongal dang dongal ji judang tralwara juche. Dongal mepe dewa tampa dang men tralwara juche. Yerin chadan ne tang tralwe tang yom chenpola ne parajuche. Doji changchen telo narodang mapa mela choche kampopa, dusum shecha kunchen kamapa, chishi chungche chupa senamdang, ritat sasum padum, paden drupaso, zablam chaja chela nyanipe, yame drugan japo tapo kajula, sowan depso kajula manam. Chupa zeno namtara jinjelo, shenlo gomji kampara sumpa shin zeno kunna chashin bepadang setya data. Chopi gomchen la yeko shempa me parajinji lo mogu gomji gora sumpa shen mena tego jepe la mala chundu sowan depe gomchen la chome mogu jawara jinji lo yeme gomji namashira sumpa shen gansha tope mo somade macho de karajope gomchen la gomcha lo dan chawara jinji lo Nantong huo chukara sumpa shen chiang mayin chiyang chawala mangaro pachawe gomchen kode yerme top para jinji Deyantai shame shamawati shameta shatru guri marajite kwarota ke orite jawati oloyane Vishuddha nimale malapanaye kukure kaka grase grasana Om mukhi paramukhi amukhi shamedavane savagraha bandhanane Nekre hentva savabha pravadina vimukta marampasha Savitva buddha mudra annukatita savamare butsarita parishuddhi Eka shantu sava mara kamane. Palen sawe lama rinpoche dage chewara pende tenshula. Karin chenpo gune chesonte kuson tuchin madrup saldo sol. Now, this is our 8th session, by the way. I didn't say that. In the previous talks, I couldn't really remember, but this one is definitely our 8th teaching. We're in the heart of the Mahamudra prayer. Although all the verses are important, these verses are really what Mahamudra is about and what we need to understand. So in the general picture, and as you'll know from looking at the complex map of the structure of this prayer, then we're in a section in general that deals with the view. So to remind you, in Mahamudra, in Dzogchen, in highest yoga tantra practices, like most of our deeper kaju practices, then the view is everything. When we go up through the different stages of tantra, then in some of them, the practice is the main thing. You do ablutions, you only eat special vegetarian food, the whole way you make the shrine, you make the practice, what you say, lots of prayers, you do prostrations, make offerings, all of that's very, very important. And you do it with faith. And as we go up from the Kriya to the Charya and then to the Yoga Tantra, highest Yoga Tantra, the stuff of the practice is still there. But the whole point is the view. How you envision reality. And the whole of the practice is to bring the view to life and to overcome our obstacles to living the view, making the view totally pure. So view is everything, and we're in a series of verses so that we get the view right. And then after that, we'll have some verses about the practice, shamatha, vipassana, Mahamudra practice. Just now, we're in the view. And it was summed up in the verse that gave us our main 3 stages. First, we have to become crystal clear that everything is mind. Everything. Out there, in here, everything. There is not one thing that wouldn't be mind. For instance, there is no material universe other than mind. We'll come back to that in a wee while. There isn't. So the first step in the view, we must not just understand the teachings on that. Deep in our heart, in here, we need to understand. We need to live our life second by second in the knowledge, in the conviction that everything is mind. I didn't say your mind or my mind. You know, me, my, us, ours is illusion. Buddha taught that. But mind, whatever mind is, this is what we're exploring. Everything is mind. That's the first step. Now, in Mahamudra practice, we need to practice, meditate, study, read the life stories, and so on, until we get to a point where everything is mind. There must be that conviction first. And then the second step is mind is no mind. That's usually the way it's said. When we look for mind, it cannot be found. So we need to actually practice and investigate with our Mahamudra teachers' help. What is this mind of ours? That's step 2. I know I've said this before, but we must get this straight, the overview. And then once we know everything is mind, but the mind cannot be found as a thing, cannot be found. Yeah, let's say found, because we are looking. Then the third step is yet. Even though everything is mind and mind can't be found, everything is manifesting with absolute clarity. Now, clarity in the Kaju school is a key word. In the Nimapa tradition, Rigpa, intelligence is a key word. Rigpa's Tibetan. In the Kagyu school, Salwa, clarity, means the same thing with a slightly different angle. Slightly different, but the same thing. So the third step is that everything manifests clearly. In other words, we are not dealing with a can't find mind. Everything is empty. Somehow ultimate reality is emptiness, empty, just empty space, nothingness, not. Everything manifests all the time, so clearly, so vividly. So that's our overview. So now we plunge into that with a verse about the first part. Everything is mind. We had that last week. What manifests as outer phenomenon is mind. What manifests in here as mind, knowing, the knower, is also mind. And so we explored that last week, but I think we need to explore it more. That's the way forward. We need to scratch below the surface. We need to stop with some ideas and consider them a little bit more. So what did we do last week? And assuming you remember and it all went in and it was crystal clear and you did a bit of research since then last week we had a quick look at mind. Do you remember we looked at the words for mind, such as vijnana and manas and citta, and then mind as the 8 consciousnesses, and quick look at the 5 sense consciousnesses, mental consciousness, storehouse consciousness, and this 7th mind, which is actually called 7th consciousness, which is called corrupting consciousness, which brings out the next moment from the alaya vijnana, from the storehouse consciousness, and then makes it feel like it's split into 2. So we had a quick look at the operations of mind. Now the main point of this is, everything is mind. And we were exploring, remember I showed you a blue shape for the non-duality and so on and so on. We were exploring how the outer world, which we feel like we are perceiving as something other, is actually a mind experience. And I made the important point, all the rest is blah, blah, blah. We say things like, but there has to be a mountain over there for me to see it. Okay, what I'm seeing is actually blah, blah, blah. It's things firing inside my visual cortex. That's what I'm seeing just now when you're looking at Ken Holmes on your screen. What you're experiencing is your visual cortex, is your brain. So that's the reality. That's what you're experiencing, your mind, just now. But you say, but there must be a Ken Holmes over there in France sitting in front of a microphone and all of that. There must be. There must be. Yeah, maybe there is. Maybe there isn't. Go and see the philosophers. They're still talking about it. All the different levels of Buddhist philosophy, not to mention the other philosophies. We're not looking at that. We're looking at how we can get enlightened. How we can make this mind, with all of its confusion and impurities, a pure mind. That's what Buddha is, a pure mind. So this, your experience, my experience, is our working material. So then we look, we saw, okay, we've got this storehouse consciousness that nobody can ever see or find. I can't go into my storehouse consciousness and see what tomorrow brings. see all the karma I've made in past lives and what it holds in store for me. And I can't go into your storehouse consciousness and see all the karma you've made in past lives and all of the things that are lined up for you to experience tomorrow, next year, next life. But nevertheless, it's there. This is the heart of the Buddha's teaching. So in the commentary by the 8th Tai Situpa, one question he touches on, and I'd like to touch on it briefly, which people asked, is how did all of this start? Where did it go wrong? Now, this is a sort of a big human question. In the traditions of the book, as they call them, then there's the idea of a fall, the fall from paradise. Once upon a time, it was all okay. And then, well, depending which stories and so on, you've got like in the Bible, they've got the old stories from Babylon that they kind of rehashed in various ways. This is why we get two Genesises and so on. But never mind, that's another story. But anyway, it was all okay until the apple and the serpent. And yeah. Forget the funny stories. Okay, there was a fall. Okay. I mean, there's one story where Eve says it wasn't the apple. It was those mushrooms. It was only after I ate the mushrooms that I started talking with the snakes. But anyway, that's just playing around. There's the idea that somehow it started, that reality started. Somebody made it, God made it, God's made it. There's a creation. And then there's the idea of our individual human story must have started somewhere. Now, this gets interesting. We don't have time to explore it, but I do need to flag up a few things for another time, and so that you know. There are, in the Buddha's teachings, there are answers. Buddha answered all the questions his disciples put to him as best he could. But there are 14, I think it's 14, questions he refused to answer. And a lot of them are about a beginning. How did it all start? And I can't say as Ken Holmes, the reason he didn't answer was this, because that would mean that I knew exactly what was going on inside the Buddha's mind. But it would seem that there is just no way within the paradigms of his disciples' minds, even the ones who are asking that question, and the people who are non-Buddhists asking him as the Buddha, how do you think it started? And he wouldn't deny anything, and he wouldn't affirm anything, because the paradigms of the mind, in the minds of the people listening, weren't ready to hold the knowledge. Simple as that. It's like you can't tell young children about what goes on between their grown-up parents. You have to put it in children's terms. You can't tell them about grown-up emotions and couples and all the kind of complex grown-up world in which we live, and all the stresses and tensions, and they're just kids. So there's no point trying to explain something that is. So then what I'll tell you next will help make that clearer. So what we have in Dharma is that samsara is beginningless. It's not just a poetic term, like, it goes back yonks, ages and ages. So I don't want to get clocks time. It's interesting, all of this, but we don't have the time. There are three ways in which it's beginningless, depending on who you're explaining it to, right? So one of them is that no matter how far we try and go back through causal chains, then there is no way we can find a beginning. No way. Another is that it's not as though chicken egg, one thing has one cause, and that one cause had its own causes, and we could go back. Every one thing that happens has many causes and conditions, and each of those causes and conditions has many others. You just go back a few days, you're lost in hundreds of thousands of things. There's no simple causality. The third thing is time, and that our image of linear time, the past has already gone, the future has not happened yet, it's yet to come, is the way our minds think, it's the way our experience usually functions, it's the way we are taught. And so we learn about three types of time: linear time, karmic time, and timeless time. So once we've digested those three teachings, and you can ask about them in the discussion afterwards if you want, then we realize that the idea of a beginning is not really relevant. It's quite interesting in thinking in modern physics and quantum physics and so on, is also of that kind of an ilk. Not just one linear time, one universe, parallel worlds and superpositions of time and so on. So then it didn't start. But what we can, even though we can't find the beginning and sort of how it started, the Big Bang that started you and your story, nevertheless, we can understand how rebirth works. Karma, cause and effect, and rebirth. And in particular, through the 12 links of interdependence. And in these teachings, these verses that we're in, interdependence is very, very important. You can substitute the word void or does not exist with is interdependent. They are not two different things. If we say something is void, with voidness we mean it's dependent, interdependent. They're not two separate things. Void doesn't mean empty, non-existent in that everyday sense. It means nothing exists in its own right, independently, because everything depends on other things, is connected to other things. So it doesn't have own existence. Simple as that. So because of interdependence, things are devoid of own existence. Their voidness is their dependence on other. In two ways. In this moment dependence, like what you're hearing depends on my voice, lots and lots of electronics and satellites and goodness knows what else. Your ear, your brain, my brain, it depends on what I learned from my teachers, what you read and learned from your teachers, how you're putting together these words to make sense of the sounds, which is like hounds, but it's got an S on the front. So you don't hear woof, 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 hounds, you hear sounds. And then once you hear sounds, you have meaning. Everything depends. Everything. In the moment. Everything. But not only that, this moment depends through time, but generated it through the 12 links of interdependence. So in the commentary, then we take a little journey through the 12 links of interdependence. An interesting topic, and not so many lamas teach it. Difficult topic to teach. I've known lots of lamas who avoid that one. When we were making programs for Samiling, and you have topics, Bodhicharya Vatara, that's top of the list. Anyone likes to do that one, Bodhisattva's way of life. Or this or that. You ask, well, how about giving us a course on the 12 links of interdependence? And their face drops. And can't you think something else? Yeah, but none of the lamas have taught that. And some people ask, tricky. Really, it's not an easy topic. So to put it briefly, we can look at 12 links over. Best way at first to get used to the idea is over 3 lives. 3 periods of time. Before this life, and then future lives. So the first link is ignorance. And it means exactly that. We ignore, we don't know our true nature, our Buddha nature. That's the cause of all the rest. All of your story has its deepest root in ignoring who you really are. That's how we made relative reality. Now, that ignorance has been going on lifetimes and lifetimes. And because of the ignorance we heard about last week, where our mind splits into 2, and this bit's me, and the other bit's you and other, and then this bit, me likes other, me hates other, me wants other, and so on. Then we make karma. So in the past, over hundreds, thousands of lives, linked to was all the karmic creations we made, which makes a background. So links 1 and 2, the ignorance, ignoring who we are, and then because of that, getting into and creating reality, situation after situation, making karma with this one, that one, this kind of karma, that kind of karma, gives us what's in our 8th consciousness, storehouse consciousness. And then link 3 is because of all of that, we had the Bardo consciousness that came into this life. So 1 and 2 are from the past, long past. Link 3 is the Bardo consciousness coming into this life. And because of the power of consciousness 7, sequences consciousness, carrying out of all the karmas that are in there, the karmic bundle that's going to make this life, our parents, the country we're born in, wealth and poverty, health and sickness, and so on for this life. So that consciousness comes in, it meets with our father's sperm, mother's egg, makes a new being. And then link 4 is that because of that, then we get what is called name and form. Now, name and form is a short way of saying the 5 aggregates, the 5 skandhas. So from the first cell, gradually we develop a body, and then the functioning of that body enables, once the eyes formed, seeing and smelling and sensations and so on. So we get, it's called name and form, but it actually means the 5 skandhas, that's number 4. And then we're born into the world, and because of the 5 skandhas, then we've got number 5, which is called contact. Hope I'm not missing one. Contact. So that means we see, hear, smell, taste, touch. You're a baby, and there you are. There's the world. And then from now until you die, you're going to be having what we saw last week, the direct sensorial experience. At the earliest stages, you haven't acquired the language and the terms and the blah, blah, blah to explain it to yourself. It's just there and it's happening, quite vivid. So we get the consciousnesses. What do we get? I'm losing track. Ignorance, karmic formations, then consciousness coming into this life, then name and form. Because of the name and form, we get the 6 doorways of perception. Yeah, our 6 doorways of consciousness. Number 6 is because of those, then we have what's called contact. Each moment, the eyes see, the ears hear, the nose smells. So, contact. And then with the 6th consciousness, the mind contacts its memories and experiences. Contact. Because of the contact, then there is number 7. I'm missing some. Oh, because of the contact, sorry. Yeah, then there is number 7, feeling. So once we see, then some things look nice. We feel nice seeing them. Some things we taste, if we're going back, it's not just about babies, this is about all of our life. But some things we taste, I think babies are quite straightforward. If they don't like the taste, they'll just spit it out. When we're grown up, we learn not to spit it out and say, very nice curry, Mr. Jones. But if you're a baby and you don't like the taste, then we don't feel good. So we're feeling. Then because of feeling, then we have number 8. For nice feelings, there is grasping. There's also, well, let's call this one involvement, number 8. There's involvement. With the nice feeling, you want more of it. There's involvement with the not nice feeling, you want to avoid it and get rid of it. Go somewhere else. So involvement. That leads to link number 9, which is deeper involvement or grasping, where we are planning. How can I get more raspberry jam? Or how can I? What do I need to do? I really want her or him. What do I need to do? Send them a text message to start with, or whatever. We get deep involvement, which is planning. Planning involves a lot of planning. That's number 9, which leads to number 10, which is doing. Now it's called becoming as a link, but that's when we actually make the karma in order to get what we want and to avoid what we don't want, and so on. When we actually speak, do physical actions, we either harm or help. So number 10 is, in this life, we create karma. As a result of what we create in this life, then now we move to the future. We will have number 11, we will be reborn as something, somewhere. And then once we are reborn, inevitably there is birth, aging, sickness, and death. So that's link 12. So we look at that over 3 lives. We can look at it, a similar process. How we've got a background. The background gives us the experience we've got. We cling at some of the experience, we reject other things, and all of that causes us to make karma. with other people and within ourselves. And then we get the consequences in future lives. We can also see the whole 12 processes in each moment, where the mind loses its possibility of primordial awareness, 5 Buddha families, elements, ignorance, and then through the power of conditioning of all of its past actions, we relate to the present moment in a particular way, with particular grasping, and we are born into the moment, and that moment dies. So the 12 links of interdependence mainly is talked about in the extensive commentary here to sort of answer the question, how can it be that this outer world seems so real and so other? It's because there is so much ancient conditioning. We can't say when it started, but we can understand how it works to a certain extent through the 12 links of interdependence. And then within that, we come to learn something very important, that the life, the universe, whatever we call it, this whole process has a basic moral fiber. If you do this kind of thing, you'll suffer in the future. Nobody's out there punishing you, but what we feel is good, caring for each other, looking after each other, being kind and selfless, peaceful, seeking inner peace, and so on, all the good things, they lead to happiness. And all the harming things we can do with our body and speech, they lead to our own suffering. So there's a basic moral fiber. But in all of this, there is the ineluctable power of karma. Interdependence means the power of karma. So if we go and explore our verse, then it says, mind's manifestations that have no real existence are deludedly taken for objects, something other than ourself. Through ignorance, innate awareness is mistaken for a self. Then it went on, you remember last week, to talk about duality. Self, other, subject, object, perceiver, percept. The blah, blah, blah people, the philosophers, can spend a lot of time and energy about the first line, how outer phenomena are perceived as objects. So when we go through the logic of the great teachers, Chandrakirti, Nagarjuna, and so on, then they explain to us with many words and many wonderful ideas until the penny drops and all of a sudden, oh, of course. How could it be any other way that what has seemed other was in fact an experience in my mind? So that's the first one. In Mahamudra, we concentrate on the second one. The awareness of the objects is mistaken for a self. So rather than the philosophy of what is existence that manifests to us, what we're interested in practice, so that we can find liberation for this heart of ours, is what is this mind. And the actual practice instructions of Mahamudra are about again and again finding this mind. That's you. You want to find who you are, but not by thinking about it. Not who am I, What am I? When you feel like you, like just now, do you feel like you? Not sure? Do you feel like Ken Holmes? You feel like you, right? I'm remembering Khenpoken now, most wonderful teacher. And we were studying, he was teaching in the shrine room and I was interpreting a very profound text. And the introduction is quite long. So they rattle off the introduction to the teaching, about bodhicitta and so on. So he rattled it off very quickly. I translated it beginning to end, didn't miss a word. I've heard that one many times before. And then he turned around and he said, very, very slowly in Tibetan, Ha ko songe. It's like saying in English, can you understand? He just spoke and so anyway, it was quite funny. It stayed in my mind, Ha ko songe. So you are understanding what I just told you about him, didn't you? Aren't you? Just now. You're understanding. So this thing inside you that feels like it's understanding, what is it? As I'm talking now, and you are understanding the words, this bit of your mind, which is understanding, try and feel it. Where is it? What is it? That's you. It's what we call me. Anyway, it isn't really me, but it's what we call me. So again and again, in the living moment, not in abstract thought, not in philosophy, not in blah, 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 as you actually feel like you, each time you feel like I'm seeing, when you're eating, or I'm enjoying this me. We don't do like they do in some spiritual systems where they say, who is enjoying? I had a wonderful friend, Magnus. He was teaching the Gurdjieff system, and a very, very fine man. But he would sound like an owl when he said it. He'd say, you're enjoying your food, but who is enjoying? Who? So in practice, in Mahamudra, every time we have this observer, taster, seer, hearer, thinker, having a deep meditation experience, whatever it is, every time we keep trying to find. I often give an analogy which comes to my mind. It's like in a dark house, you come and you catch a thief. In the instant, you grab their collar and you shine a torch on their face. Who the hell is this burgling my house? You see in the moment. You want to see what's going on. So in Mahamudra practice, this second line, through ignorance, innate awareness. This word innate is very important in Mahamudra. What is naturally there? Innate to what? To mind. This whole verse is about mind. Out there is mind. In here is mind. Innate to mind is awareness. But we mistake it for a self, a personal self. So that's why we keep looking to find out exactly what it is, trying to catch it each moment. What is it? Where is it? How is it? And we find there is no fixed self. Self does not exist in that sense of non-existence that I've explained many, many times. So let's stop there for a moment and think about, why have we got all of this does not exist, does not exist, does not exist, or is void, is void, is void. That's becoming important in the coming lines, the next verse. It's because people were looking for something that is ultimately true. Let's take our modern science, for instance. Our science is nearly all material science. Science can only prove something if there is some material proof. If there's no material proof, they're lost. It's all about matter has to be real. Even though you can take it down to subatomic particles, energy, however they express, that's real. Right? That's reality. That's what's going on. And inside us, that's what makes our brains, it makes all these brain chemicals, all the stuff that people get so excited about these days. Buddhists, they put science on a higher pedestal than Dharma because they discover brain chemicals and they say, this is what happiness is. No comment. No comment. Anyway. But scientists assume that the material universe is real. And that's what gives rise to everything, our thoughts, our feelings, our reactions, and all of that. Back in the past, before the Buddha, at the Buddha's time, in the time of the Buddhist era in India, people are looking for something that is ultimately true. Just like Christians have God. God made everything, God's eternal. Before there was anything, there was God. God made the world. One day it might all go back to him. Anyway, he's in charge. But God is. God is. Or in other faiths, a whole series of gods. They're kind of the cosmic forevers, the different faces of creation, destruction, whatever, are gods. Or there is Purusha, an eternal potential. It's like kids' Play-Doh. You've got the Play-Doh, and you can make castles, you can make animals, you can make people. So there's like the universal Play-Doh, which is Purush, potential to become anything. People were looking for something that truly is, as opposed to our transient passing lives on earth here. So when we say something isn't or doesn't exist, we only mean it in that sense. It's not a forever thing. There's no eternal Ken. There's no eternal soul. There's no eternal God. There's no eternal mind, if we come to the Buddhist view of things. Only that. Nothing is in its own right forever. Doesn't depend on anything else to be what it is. Yeah. So we look into that. This innate awareness is mistaken for an I, a self. So when we meditate, when we become familiar with our mind, we can start to distinguish between moment by moment direct experience and the storytelling that goes along with it, where we tell the story of me and we make the story of others. Changing story. But the story of me is very important in that. That's the one that brings the suffering. So because of this strong idea of me and other, then we have the 12 links of interdependence, and that causes rebirth. So it says one wanders in the maze of existence. And the last line was, May ignorance, which is the root cause, and delusion, which are all the delusions of myself and other, all the deluded storytelling that we've made the karmic creations linked to over time, and just now too. May ignorance and delusion be exposed. May we wake up to what's going on. It's exposed, it's like in the media, exposed what nobody knew about, what was undercover, what was dirty stuff in secret or whatever. Now all the world knows. We see what's going on, how it works. So our Mahamudra practice will be for that. Now all of that, when we look back, and there's so much more to say because we've just touched on so many key Buddhist topics there. Consciousness, 12 links, and so on. But all of that's about mind. Remember, we're in step one. This verse is about step one. Everything's mind. So if we explored all of that, the play of mind through the power of karma and how it produces our version of other, mum, dad, him, her, life, our body, health, everything. All mind. Now the next verse is about mind is no mind. Verse 11. It doesn't exist. What? Just a moment. Excuse me. You've just said that everything out there is mind, and that all of our idea of self and me and everybody is me. Like here, we've got 50 people. We've got 50 me stories going on here. And I think they're all very, very different. Right? All of that, you just said it's mind. And now you're saying, okay, next verse, mind doesn't exist. What? So what does it mean? It means mind does not exist independently. Mind as interdependence. Yes, that cannot exist because it's changing all the time. You couldn't catch it. Mind as interdependence changes every split second. We can observe that in meditation. But mind as the something that's doing all of this, mind that's making a me, mind that's making a movie of life every second for us. We can't find a mind, a something that's doing this, that doesn't change. It's like you're in the cinema, the movie's going on. It's been rather a long film, many thousands of lifetimes, and just now on screen is Ken Holmes' talk. But you start going up to look for the projector at the back of the cinema, and you can't. Oh, Neil's asking if there's distracting background noise. Yes? What kind of a noise is it?
Crackling. Crackling.
Oh, I'm not sure what that might be. I'll try and shift my microphone and...
Do you have a fan on, Ken?
No, not today, no fan.
Oh, it sounds a bit like a fan.
Then I don't know.
It's gone now.
That's gone?
Yeah.
Okay, I shifted a few things. Sorry for that. Okay. Was it very bad? Could you hear what I was saying?
No, it wasn't.
Wasn't bad. Okay, thanks. So hate to have to say it all again. So where were we? A mind that's like in a cinema. Okay, in an ordinary cinema, you can go to the back of the room and there's the thing that's doing it all. It's projecting the stuff on the screen. If we try and find mind that's making the me, that's making what we observe as objective reality, nobody ever found it. Nobody. Even the Buddhas. So if anyone can find it, it's the Buddhas. I think we already did this last week. So they didn't. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Curious. We know that nobody ever found it. It's very unlikely anyone will ever find it. But in Mahamudra practice, we have to look for it. And that's not stupid as it sounds, because it's in the looking, the seeking, the trying to understand, the trying to catch it in the act again and again in the living moment. This thing that feels like you, that feels like your intelligence, your knowing, your awareness now. Imagine if you weren't aware now. You'd be dead. I mean, not even dead. Dead, we still have experience. Just blank. You're not. You're aware. It's amazing. And you can turn this awareness to this and to that. So now we're trying to find, what is it? What is it? Where is it? Nobody ever did. And all of our Dharma progress, or so much of it, will come through this seeking. Even though we know we'll never find it. Now, why? So, I'm really glad for the Karmapa's teachings, because he puffs some pants sometimes. He goes like this. I can't do it like him, but it's there's just so much to say, and how can you put it into words, sounds? You have to. So okay, there's why do we have to look? Why do we have to look? It's so that we discover the real meaning of voidness. Not something you read on Facebook, not something you read by this famous Tibetan master or Indian master that you can quote and say clever words. In the total intimacy of your own being, you need to discover voidness, not as a concept, but as a reality, not as an idea, not as a belief, not as a philosophical school you belong to. So we come back to the difference between direct perceived reality, each moment generated by karma, direct perceived reality, non-conceptual reality, and the concepts that we apply to it, the blah, 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 the storytelling. Now, when we come back to our 8 consciousnesses, we saw that consciousness 7, called warping or deforming or distorting consciousness, splits everything into two. This is a raw split of direct perception every moment. You can't stop it. Many of us have tried. And we can talk about oneness. Sometimes we can feel oneness, but there's somebody experiencing oneness when you really look. If you look closely, if it was a real oneness, there wouldn't be anybody there having an experience of oneness. You'd be gone. You'd be gone in the one. There wouldn't be a you left. There might be a huge experience of unity, harmony, oneness, connectedness. There's somebody in there having that experience. It's dualistic. This dualistic split, which is one thing, will be with you and with me until we reach the very end of the 7th Bodhisattva level. It's an incredibly high and vast state of mind. No way to stop it. 7th consciousness will be operating until that level, splitting each moment into an apparent two-sidedness. Subject, object. We have to deal with that. Now that's one thing, the dualistic split. The other thing is dualistic thoughts. Now we can work with those, and we must work with those, and that's why we have all the teachings on shunyata and voidness, and why we need to look at the mind again and again and again to find out what it is. Dualistic thought is the storytelling that we develop around this inevitable split of consciousness. So we form a story of me, we form a story of others, and of course, as we know, those stories can change. The other who is a friend can become an enemy. The me who can't stand spinach can come to love spinach, and so on and so forth. The storytelling, the dualistic storytelling, we can see through even quite quickly. Even when we're still in the early stages of the path, we can see what's going on. And how Ken is telling Ken a story about Ken. Or Ken, story. And people, when they're down, we can tell them a story and then they get up. When they're up, we can tell them a story and bring them down. Ideas in the mind about themselves and others and the world and life and everything. So dualistic concepts and dualistic split are not the same thing. So when we talk about duality, remember it says, under the sway of this dualistic perception, one wanders in the maze of samsara. So we need to work by this understanding of karma, cause and effect, the 8 consciousnesses, how they work. We can not with that much difficulty get on top of the dualistic split. So, okay, mind. Oh yeah, there's something else I need to say. So then, this is where the teachings on shunyata have their value. Nagarjuna, and before that, the basic Buddhist teachings about anatta, no self, they have their value. They say, look at this me that's so solid for you. What's it made of? It's made of components, and each component is made of components, feelings, thoughts, cognitive labeling, and so on. We take it apart. Basic Buddhist teachings, Nagarjuna's teachings, mainly about the objective world, and how it seems so solid and fixed, but it's not. Now, all of those teachings on shunyata, on voidness, emptiness, are called remedial voidness, remedies that tell us ego doesn't exist as something lasting and solid. Things, people don't exist as lasting, solid, real. They exist as interdependent, ever-changing realities, yeah, that kind of existence, but they don't exist in that philosophical meaning. Now, there's something to be said about remedial voidness. It's a remedy, and you need to apply the remedy for as long as you've got the sickness. It's a remedy for what? It's a remedy for dualistic thinking. I and others. So there's something in the scriptures. There's a very vivid example, and I think I've shared it with some of you many times. But it's about remedies. So this is the example of constipation, right? So your regular samsaric being is compared to somebody who is constipated. You are blocked up. There's something very, very solid. Okay, I think we all know what constipation is. Constipated. Okay. The constipation can get serious, and if you're not going to the toilet by yourself, then you need a little bit of help. So you take a laxative. If you take enough laxative, let's imagine it's chocolate laxative, then things free up. The problem's over. You stop taking the laxative. But what if the chocolate of the laxative is so tasty that you can't stop eating it? So now you've got a new problem, which is that you can't stop eating the chocolate and you're on the toilet all the time because you're far too loose. So this is used as an analogy in the scriptures about remedial voidness. As long as we are under the power of a strong ego, persona, me, can't shift, inflexible and all the rest of it, and strong projections of other people, which causes all the trouble of samsara. We like this one, favor this one, don't like that one, and so on. Cause us to do all the things we do to get what we want, avoid what we don't want, and so on. Once the remedy to show us how these are just thoughts. This is dualistic thinking because of the dualistic split. So we need the remedy, but we must be careful not to get stuck in the remedy to the point where it makes us even sicker than the sickness. So we have what are called the pundits of voidness. And these are described by Saraha as lost causes. Nothing you can do. Nothing you can do to help them. People who say things like, oh, anyway, you don't exist, I don't exist. It doesn't exist, so it doesn't matter. Because then it says, whereas before when you were plumbed into samsaric thinking, even though you were mistaken, you were deluded to make it so solid and real, you felt compassion for people who hurt. You wanted to help. You had loving kindness for some. But when we think that nothing exists, then people are just fooling themselves. They don't really exist at all. We think wrongly. They're just figments of my own projection and so on. So we come to the problem of what is called the non-existent. Now, we're near the end of the session. We must all be a bit tired. but I think I have to say something about this. Exist is wrong. Things only exist temporarily, interdependently, right? It's a mistake. But non-existence is even more wrong. It's okay as a remedy. Your thinking's been skewed. You need to bring in new thoughts to correct it. You think, I exist, so then you say, I don't exist. And then in the end, it's sorted. So I want to make it easy and clear, but I'm not quite sure how. Okay, I want you to check where you are now, your room, right? Please do have a good look, and I want you to check for alligators, big alligators in your room just now, right? Are there anyone got an alligator in their room? Right? Anybody? I hope not, but anyway, you never know. I did read the other day of somebody who was in trouble with the hotel because they had a pet alligator in the bed with them. But anyway, that's another story. So now, okay, there's no alligator. Now, if I say to you, let's rest now in meditation of the absence of alligator in your room, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What is it? It's nonsense. It has a bit of sense if there was really an alligator in the room. Okay, it smelt terrible. You were in fear for your life and so on. If there was a problem in the first place, and then the alligator walked out all by itself, then there'd be an absence of alligator for a moment. That would be a relief. Fair enough. When there was an alligator in the first place, the immediate absence of alligator has some sense. If there was never an alligator in the first place, then spending your mind time dealing with absence of alligators is a total waste, isn't it? And if you try and sit in a meditation of alligator absence, you're a fool. Okay, now let's apply that not to alligators, but to yourself. A persona. If there was never one in the first place, so all the Buddha's basic teachings about no self, anatta, and then the Nagarjuna teachings about nothing, no phenomena at all. If we're sure they were never there in the first place, can you rest in a meditation of no self? What you going to do? What you going to do? There was never one in the first place. So the absence is even more ridiculous. So the ideas of no self, and this doesn't exist truly, in its own right, independently. We need to deal with those as long as they have power over us. But then once we've applied the remedy, like the laxative, and we get the point that everything is just the amazing play of interdependence, then telling yourself, I don't exist, it doesn't exist, and so on, can be very dangerous. Saraha says, people who believe in samsara are stupid like cattle. Sorry, cattle. But people who believe in non-existence are even more stupid. This happens in the Buddhist world. And shunyata, voidness, isn't some kind of big blank absence that you can go into. an it that would be the true nature of this mind. Even the Buddhas haven't found this kind of it, true nature, void, the void. So that's why we talk about shunyata, voidness, and not shunya, avoid. We need to avoid the void. So then, how is it? It says, it's not a combination of opposites. Like a black, it says in the text, like a black and white thread, which will be wound together, and so many black and white threads that when you look from a distance, it's sort of grey. There isn't somehow things exist, but they don't exist. It's kind of the stuck philosopher who's been pushed back into a corner by somebody who's got very sharp logic. You say, okay, so you realize these things don't exist. Oh yeah, okay, they don't exist. And then they don't. Then the stuck philosopher says, well, it's sort of a mixture of existence and non-existence. They kind of exist, but they don't exist. Sort of woolly philosophy. It's not that, for sure. But also, they're not two things, like some things exist or don't exist, to be combined. It's called simultaneity. Now this word simultaneity, sahaja, is a very big deal in the history of Mahamudra. When we look at the history of its great teachers, then some of them use this word, sahaja Mahamudra, the Mahamudra, the great mudra, the great seal of simultaneity. And then Karmapa says, simultaneity, comma, the middle way. So the simultaneity of voidness and manifestation. Things manifest, yet they have no actual reality. We have examples for this. A rainbow, a beautiful example. There's no colored material up in the sky. We see it. It manifests through interdependence. When there's the sun and water vapor and our eye, and we're standing in the right place, and we've got a brain that can do this kind of processing, all of that together makes in our mind the appearance of a rainbow. It's not in the sky, there's no colors. You send up a helicopter, can't get any color out the sky. It's not in your eye. You can't cut open the eye of somebody looking at a rainbow and find colors. It's not in the brain. You can't cut open their brain and find a rainbow. Where is it? Think about this for days on end. Where is that rainbow? Go out with a hose pipe and make a rainbow and try and work out, where is it? It's there, vividly manifest, but it's not what it seems to be. So it's devoid of the nature it seems to have. Voidness, manifestation. Together, you can't separate them. A dream is another example. You dream of the most wonderful, magical castle. And when you wake up, where was it? What was it? Who built the walls? Nobody. And so on and so on. Yet it manifested, yet none of what was manifested had any tangible, lasting reality. It manifested because of causes and conditions. So this is the real meaning of the middle way. And all our teachers tell us, Tai Situpa tells it so wonderfully, wonderfully. He says, it is the middle, not because it's the middle place between two extremes, where you've got white and black, and somewhere in the middle there's sort of grey, or long and short, and somewhere in the middle, medium length. It's middle because it's never extreme. It never falls into an extreme. It's like walking on a tightrope. You go this way, you fall a long way down that way. You go lean this way, you fall off that way. You stay in the middle, and you're fine. So what's the middle? Freedom from the power of dualistic concepts. Some of your concepts say it is, some say it isn't. Some say lasting, permanent, some say impermanent. Some say suffering, some say happiness. And when we transcend the power of the narrative, when we stay in the blessed place of the lineage, which teaches us to avoid the power of the narrative, then that is the middle way. And there is so it's definitely not, when we talk about emptiness, voidness, shunyata, it's definitely not some big empty space. It's so this middle way, the center. Where is the center? It's right now, in this moment. And so often this is compared to Indra's net. So I know the time's getting on, but I do want to talk about Indra's net just a little bit. So Indra's net, now let's see if I can share an image. Okay. You might hear noise because I'm picking up my keyboard. Okay. Okay, can you see something? Yeah. Now this is obviously a spider's web with dewdrops on it, right? But it's quite good as an example or as an analogy for Indra's net. So in Indra's net, each dharma, each moment, each person is at a crossroads, like where two threads cross. And they're like a jewel. A jewel, it's a net. So, a net is string or threads that cross over. And each crossover is a jewel. Each jewel reflects all the other jewels, but in particular the jewels that are closest to it. What's happening inside any one of the jewels depends on what's happening in the neighboring jewels, and because they are connected to their neighboring jewels in the end, to everything. So there is this idea of Indra's net. Okay, so the simultaneity, the center, that's the middle way, is this moment, and how this moment is part of an infinite web connected to others. Now this moment's happening in your mind, what I call your mind, which is linked to other minds, some of them very close to yours in this life, in this time, but they're linked to other ones, and all of us are linked to our past, and our present moment reflects the others, but they are changing. So that is one image. Now let's make this a little bit more complicated. Okay, I found this on Facebook the other day. It's okay. Now, what do I want to do? Yes, this. Okay. Now, can you see here? There is a three-dimensional form that's got curved crossing framework with a light inside, but because of that, it's projecting a two-dimensional grid onto the surface, right? Is to help us understand that something which is multidimensional can in our reality just have one level of presence, let's say. And the fun thing, always, just to tickle your thoughts, is that you are looking at a two-dimensional image of a three-dimensional object making a two-dimensional shape. Right? What's on your screen is flat and two-dimensional. Yet your intelligence, your awareness, can understand through this how your present moment, your center of space, your center of the universe, your place in Indra's net is devoid of any own reality because it's connected to all the rest of reality. You see, emptiness does not mean blank, nothing there. In what we call the Shentong view, so beautifully expressed by Tai Situpa in his commentary to this work, then nothing exists on its own because everything depends on everything else and is connected to everything else, and everything else is changing. And not just that, our two-dimensional experience just now is part of a much more multi-dimensional reality that's going on. So the last line is, may the truth of all this, freedom from any extremes, the extremes of dualistic concepts saying it is this, it is that, where we are desperate to put a label on. The truth is beyond all references. It just is. In this moment which is your life, in all of its beauty and complexity, connected and reflecting the lives of those around you, connecting and reflecting the lives of those around them, and what's going on in this world of karma, and so on. This middle way is something so extraordinary. And it's where Mahamudra teachings will take us. So let's dedicate anything that was good and useful to all of our fellow beings. Sonam diye tamche zikpani, tomnenye pedranam pamchene, je ganache pala trukpaye, sipe sole trowa trowarisho, chanchu sencho rinpoche, maje panam jeju chik, jepa nyampa me padang, kongne kongdu galwarisho, gewa diye nyududa, chaja chempo drukjone, drowa chikjang malupa, Deye Sala Kabarasho. So thank you all very, very much. And I'm sorry there was obviously some problem with the sound. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I hope it didn't spoil things too much. Yeah. Anyway, over to you now. I don't know if you've got any comments you'd like to make.
Thank you, Ken. That's been really massive to digest today, but I found that going over that verse again really useful. I suppose I just wanted to say that while you were asking some of those questions, an experience that I've just noticed before as well in other situations has been just an experience of, I can only describe it really as everything kind of having a shimmering quality about it, but it's very brief and it's just in between the gaps of kind of more regular thinking. That's all I can say at the moment, but it was really valuable to revisit that. So thank you.
Yeah, there's in this book behind me here, there's a glossary of terms all about that shimmeringness, because they're impossible to translate. And they're lovely little terms you know, like in English, you have the term willy-nilly, you know, words that sound like that. In Tibetan, there are terms, and they are about this shining, shimmering, sparkling quality that you just can't pin down with proper words. It's just something there. And actually, usually those terms are part of our introduction to reality. So if one has the blessing of sitting with one's meditation teacher during a sort of a meaningful experience like that, it's then that the teacher will say, this is willy-nilly, or whatever the word is using, you know, so that you actually, through experience, you know, or sometimes they'll do it on purpose like this. You can take a very, very fine silk handkerchief and drop it onto a surface, and then, you know, when it lands, it kind of unfolds very slowly and lands so gracefully. There's a word for that. And so they'll say, you know, when your mind settles into place with that kind of smoothness and beauty. Yeah, so there's special terminologies. Translator's nightmare. Anyway.
Ken,
Yes, Rose.
I just want very quickly to say, I'll put the video on. So for me, at points, that wonderful sound that some people felt really distracted actually had that kind of quality.
Oh.
So that's all I wanted to say.
Maybe it's some extraterrestrial interference.
or it's the alligator.
Especially targeted at some of our listeners.
Ken. Hi, Ken.
Hiya.
I was just wondering, it's Dorcas.
Yes, hello, Dorcas.
Hi. I was just wondering, is it okay if we say Om Mani Padme Hum for a seagull I saw this morning? He was just suffering so much. He looked like his both legs were broken. Just wondered if we could say Om Mani Padme Hum.
For whom did you say?
Just for a bird, a seagull I saw this morning.
Oh, a seagull. Oh, yeah.
He was suffering so much because he looked like both his legs were broken.
Oh, yeah. Om Mani Padme Hum. Yeah, for sure.
I would have just a bit different question if it's
yes, Renata.
maybe a bit distracting. I'm just wondering if it's completely bit different. If Dharma contains Buddha nature and the ordinary mind at the same time.
If Dharma contains
Dharma too.
Dhamma Dhatu, yeah. Dharma, I mean, these, most terminology is specialized. So Dhamma Dhatu contains, that's its term, it means the space in which something happens. It's like the space of mind. It's not a physical space, it's the space of mind that enables mind to manifest whatever it does. And I meant to come on to that today. It was going to be one of today's topics, but I ran out of time. About that previous verse has its obvious meaning, which I explained, but there's what's called an implicit meaning as well. So I'll come to that next time round. So because Dhamma Dhatu is the universal container of everything, then its nature is Buddha nature, and it contains all of our samsaric experience. Just like your nature as an awakened person, when you're in the waking life, that's you. And if you fall asleep and dream, you are still you, but that nature of you has made a dream illusion. But you didn't stop being you. So like Dhamma Dhatu has the true nature which never changed, which was how it always is, always will be, but it also contains everything.
And just one more thing. So Buddha mind and Buddha nature is the same, means that Buddha nature, the samsaric experience is the same as Buddha mind.
It gets more complicated here because the language that I use to talk, the language that you find in English translations, is usually not so precise as Tibetan texts or Sanskrit texts. And so Tibetan teachers, if they're just giving a talk to help people understand, then they can use words like Buddha mind. But if they weren't just saying that to help people understand, if we talk about Buddha, we wouldn't usually use the word mind. We'd talk about primordial wisdom. We'd talk about jhana. Right? That is what we will call what's Buddha's mind is primordial wisdom. We wouldn't use the word mind. It's a difference between technical written language and spoken language.
I got it.
You got it? Yeah. Good.
I got it. Thank you.
Hi, Ken.
Yes.
Just like to say thank you for a beautiful teaching, really deep, and you've given us lots to think about. It also reminded me of what you've been saying, this non-duality, but the experiment with the shine light through 2 slots in a card.
Yeah.
And the third comes up, all these dots in the middle, you know. That just reminded me so much of that.
Yeah. It's very interesting what happens in physics. They can't see where they're going, but they're getting there.
Yeah. Also, maybe the noise is your lump of quartz resonating.
Is my what?
Lump of quartz, you know, your crystal.
Oh, yeah. I don't know what it is. I had something leaning against the microphone. And also I have a keyboard that's tucked in front of me. I took that away. I think that rattles. If I make any slight body movement, then there's a bit of a sound. Don't know what it was.
It wasn't too distracting anyway, thank you.
Good. Anne, you wanted to say something?
I was actually just waving goodbye for this.
Oh, I see. Okay, bye-bye.
Ken, could I ask about the 7th consciousness? When you said, I've kind of never got my head around that properly. That it extracts a bundle of karma for us to work our way through in this life. But how is that karma attached, if you like? Is it to do with the attachments that we had in the previous life that causes us to activate a certain package of karma, or is it, I don't know, it sounds like some sort of malevolent thing that gets a hold of you and throws stuff at you.
It's a bit like that. All of the names that are given to it are nasty names. It's called warping consciousness, spoiling consciousness, but actually it is the power of each of our past karma that kind of pushes it to the front of the queue or pushes it further back. So there's a kind of a natural sequencing. It's like in a garden, the stronger plants will push up and they'll dominate other ones, or they'll take all the nourishment. So if we go back to this web of Indra, which is me, which is you, which is all the people around us, then a lot of our karma is to do with other people, right? And so first of all, their karma is part of what brings them into the same world at the same time as us in a future life. Maybe I make karma with you, but we might not see each other for another 55 lives. Your karma might have taken you to all sorts of places, mine to all sorts of places, but when the power of the karma we made comes to its turn, then we'll be in the same world. So that day that you walk through my door, or I walk through your door, will make this what we call seventh consciousness, pull out our history from the box, and then we might be very attracted to each other, or we might not be able to stand the sight of each other, or whatever it is. We might set up a business together, all sorts of things.
Also, yeah. It's just such a strange thing. It seems almost as if it's separate from.
No, this is
From
this is one of the problems. All of Dharma teaches 6 consciousnesses and the 5 senses and mind. So what the mind-only school did was say, but look, our mind consciousness, it has somehow this ability to bring this karma on next and that karma on next. And so we say, let's give it a special name. It's so important for all of us. It's so important for all of us that let's call that 7th consciousness. So we see that not only does it bring that next karma on, but also it gives us the dualistic feeling. But it's not a thing, nobody will ever find it anywhere. It's just something that observers have seen the mind does. And because it's so important, then we give it its own name. Susan, I turned everyone's sound off because there was a lot of background noise from somewhere. You'll need to turn your sound back on. Yeah, good. Okay.
Thank you, Ken. I think I've understood it better now.
Oh, good.
If that is possible. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Well, I wish you a very, very, very good week, and have a nice just beginning of the weekend. So have a nice weekend, good week. And yeah, we're still Mahamudra prayer next week. So I'll see you then. Okay.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks, Ken. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.